that little voice in our head is really our voice of caution. And we talk about silencing it, but really what we want to do is neutralize it because we can't silence it. It's part of who we are. And it is one of the triggers for our physiological stress process.
Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Hello, friend. Welcome back to this show. I have a new best friend with me. Her name is Camilla. The information about her is in the show notes, but we are going to talk about stress. None of us have stress, right? And how that inner critic or that bully voice inside our head sometimes can amplify or make our stress go off the charts. And Camilla is expert in this. And I am so excited to hear and talk about getting stress out of my head. And I have to tell you, when we sat down and started chatting, I was a little bit stressed, just like in a rush mode. And I feel so calm and cool now. So she is amazing. So Camilla, help us out of our heads and get rid of some stress.
That's so kind. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. And, it's so interesting, the connection between that inner critic and our stress. And it might be helpful to just kind of hear a little bit about my story and how that has affected me. And then we can hopefully help you with some of the things that have helped me. Would that be all right?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. So I'll set the stage for you. It was fall-ish of 2020. We've gone through, 6 years of fertility treatments to have my child. And I had worked pregnant through COVID. I've been in healthcare, had worked pregnant through COVID, had my son in COVID. We had lost our family dog recently. We had been caregiving for friends with Parkinson's. And so we were really just exhausted, right? And had this newborn. And I started having like all of these really intrusive thoughts postpartum. And no therapist or anything post-COVID. But I started doing some digging once I had a name to it and really worked on it. But fast forward to a few years later, and I started, this business. And in order to really get to where I wanted to be in this business, I had to kind of step out of my comfort zone. And for me, that was, doing things like this and being on social media. And this voice inside my head just was always popping in and just saying, but you can't do that. They're going to think you're a fraud. You don't know enough, and this side of my head was saying, but you do know a lot. You are good enough. And that back and forth. And I remembered what I had learned about the intrusive thoughts postpartum. And I put that together with what I knew about evidence-based stress management and where that inner critic comes from. And I developed just a sequence of events that really helped me. I named it the shift method, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want you to understand that inner critic that creates so much stress that we have, that is part of our survival mechanism. That is a normal part of how we actually survived the past, tens of thousands of years. If we had seen the lion go into the den and said, that looks like a good place to live too, we wouldn't have survived this long without a healthy dose of skepticism and curiosity and analysis. So that little voice in our head is really our voice of caution. And we have to really help. We talk about silencing it, but really what we want to do is neutralize it because we can't silence it. It's part of who we are. And it is one of the triggers for our physiological stress process. So with that heightened sense of safety concern or, that voice saying, are you sure about this? That can trigger the cascade of physiological changes in our body that is our stress response, such as increased blood pressure, our heart rate goes up, our breathing gets faster. We mobilize all of this glucose to our muscles, so we're ready to fight. That happens with just that thought. So what we really want to do isn't so much silence it as we want to be able to manage it and neutralize it. And many people think that the way to do that is with positive thoughts, which is true. You want to kind of counteract that negative thought with a positive thought. But we often miss just a key component of a step in between there. And that is really identifying that underlying fear of what we are actually being cautious of, and then working on bringing compassion and acceptance and self-empathy to that part before we try to reframe what that negative thought is. And that piece in the middle, that's the key. And, once I figured this out, and also once I realized like this doesn't go away, our inner critic doesn't go away. We just need to know what to do with her, and I named mine. Once I knew what to do with her and what her role was, and that she was actually trying to protect me, then I could evaluate, okay, do I need protection? Is there something really scary here that might interfere with what I'm trying to do? And then we work to reframe it. And so what that does is that helps diminish our stress response because we're able to respond in a much more practical way. And it also helps to dampen the impact of that inner critic voice on us.
I love it because it's pretty close to what I use the word silencing, but it's really that reframing. It's what is this true? Is this really a threat to me? And it's funny how we dwell on the things that didn't go right, but the things that went right, we don't focus on because they're not a threat. And our bodies are trained to watch out for threats. And so
100%.
we replay it and replay it. And so once you identify that, it's like, I feel like I am being disrespected in this situation. And then I think about it for months and months and months. And it only happened one time. And how do I take that initial trigger and turn it into my best friend? Because it is a warning to keep you safe. And it's okay to put in boundaries to avoid that, but it's not okay to completely board yourself up. And like, I will never get unsafe again. And it's just what's natural. It's natural to watch out for that threat. And it's like, why is my head only thinking about the bad things? It's how we were built.
Exactly. And I think that's so important because we often think that that there's something wrong with us if we can't get out of that space. But, not necessarily the case. And there's one of the things that we can do to help create some space there between that voice and really who we are as people is to put yourself in the third person, or like I did, just name that, and instead of hearing that voice that says, you don't really know what you're doing. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not, smart enough or whatever, fill in the blank enough. You put your name to it. Camilla, you aren't smart enough. Camilla is not good enough. And all of a sudden, to have that distance in a third person rather than the first person, that oftentimes is enough to break that cycle, to break us out of that cycle of spinning, because it's very different when we hear our name and versus just trying to internalize it. And so that's one of the things that, one, I teach, and two, I practice, is to put a separate name to that inner critic. And what that does is it helps us put the brakes on. And then we can come in with our mindfulness practices. We can come in with our acceptance. We can come in with our self-compassion. But we have to first acknowledge where we are and what is happening before we bring that part in.
It's funny because I named mine George. And
Oh, nice.
I don't know why I picked a male figure. Maybe because growing up, I felt like the people who were the most in your face and you felt like attacked from were men, and at high school it changed. It was definitely the other girls. But it's like, okay, George, is this really bad? Is this really going to hurt me again?
Mhm.
And yeah, so it does help to separate you from it. Like, George, why are you feeling so anxious right now?
Well, and we are, when we talk about how we respond to stress and the volume of that inner critic, there's two things that we know from science, and that is we have two factors that go into how we respond to a stressful situation, and that is one, our genetic code. We know from research that if your grandmother had a very stressful life, then that stress can be embedded into our DNA and passed down. And we see that as it manifests itself in our susceptibility for different diseases. Kids that have stress, mothers that had a great deal of stress, they are more prone to things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, mental health disorders like depression, anxiety. So we know this, we see that changes us. So that genetic makeup is one. The other is our experience. And so what we have experienced and what we have experienced to be dangerous or to be a threat drastically affects how much and at what volume we have our warning signs set up. You're contemplating.
Yes, I'm definitely contemplating. It's like, I like this. So how, like, that stress response, I just look at it as so important because it lets me know when I'm overloaded. It lets me
Mhm.
know when I may not, like, I'm fearful of the future. Can I really make this happen? And I'm sitting there trying to put it into those words going, okay, that works. I'm
Mhm.
like, so yes, it works. And I like that way of looking at it. What about, I know we have that genetic code. And
Mhm.
I know a lot of the things that I go through was just the environment that I was raised in.
Yeah,
And I really do have a hard time knowing that really my great, 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 great grandparents' stress is still in me,
possibly.
And I
Well,
know I'd gone through some classes that were releasing ancestral stress and stuff like that. Um, and they were fun, but I never really got it. Like, could it really be there?
Well, I think it makes a little bit more sense if we look at it in terms of behavior patterns rather than just straight up genetics. And, what we've learned is also, what the way our parents were raised, my parents were raised in a different generation. The boomer generation was raised a little bit differently. My grandfather came back from World War II, which, now there's just so much distance between that war and here. But when I was a kid, it was still very much a talking point. So we also have to look at generationally the way that children were raised and what we have learned over time through research and experience about what those things mean. And you look at just, I have a 4-year-old and, reading about how I raise him, my mom is just saying, like, it's just very different. We just know more about how the little kid's brain develops, but we also know and have an appreciation of how significant those first few years are when our brains are developing and we are mapping out how and what is stressful and how we respond to that. And you see it in the language now, emotional regulation. Like, my parents never talked about emotional regulation with me, And so it's becoming part of our vernacular. It's part of, how we are aware of the things that we say to our children and how they're raised. And so the genetic code, I think that can be a little obtuse for some people, but I think we can all really relate to the patterns of behavior and how we were raised and how that affected us because we all went through that. We've all experienced that.
And I've seen a huge shift in parenting in just my years. Okay, there's a lot of them, but just it's like
Just experience.
the way I was treated. Okay, let's just use a story. I was not good in school. I bet I had ADD. I don't know. I've never been tested, but my children have it and my grandkids have it. So I'm pretty sure I had it too. But I was constantly not getting good grades, just not happening. And my mom would say things like, I'm going to paper your room with all your failing notices, and I'm going to do this. And for me, my focus on my children wasn't the grade. It's like, I am not going to care because I learned a lot. In fact, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but when we talk or chat about things, I know more than people who had straight A's. I learned differently. I did things differently. So with my children, I never once bragged about grades. It's like, do your homework if you want to, but let me know what you learned today. I didn't really tell them they couldn't do it. I asked them to, but it's like, what did you learn? That's all I cared about, not what the grade the teacher thought. And you think about it, and some of the best authors out there failed all their English classes because it wasn't the style those teachers liked. And so I let my children off the reins a lot more than I had been off the reins. And then I see newer generations and they're even freer. And so it's changed a lot.
How do you think that changed who they are as adults?
I honestly think they're not second guessing whether they can learn it or not, because the grade of what somebody else thought wasn't important. It's if they could get it. And in fact, my daughter and I were having a conversation the other day, and she just said, I am thankful that you let us learn at our speed and that you didn't push us. She's she's a teacher. She's extremely intelligent. She's amazing. And for a time there, she had bad grades. And I didn't get good grades until I went to college. I go to college and all of a sudden I'm a straight A student because
what changed?
I was able to doodle. Teachers in high school and junior high would say, stop doodling and pay attention. I pay attention through movement. And nobody in college cared at all if I was doodling or doing whatever or taking notes. And for me, that was the difference. I remember going to, as a project manager for years and years and years, I was in a project meeting with my team and I was doodling. And they were talking about us, how do we solve this problem? And I was just listening to it and just doodling away. And then I said, guys, why don't we try this? And then I walked out of the room. One of the guys said, I didn't think you were even paying attention to us. It's just like, but that was my way of not being distracted by looking at people and doing things. I was just able to flow. And so that was the difference for me. And it's allowing people to learn their own learning style that I think is so critical.
Well, I have so many things that come to mind when you're saying that, but my sister does a lot of presentations and speaking engagements, and I got this from her. I always bring when I do especially small groups, I always have a fidget pack that I bring with me. And that's what I say. I was like, this is just for people who need to move when they're thinking. And, and it's amazing. It's amazing how many people will take something out of the box. And it also, I hear your story and I think, again, you're seeing that generational change, but I just think that must have been so stressful for you, to have to really try to conform to a way of thinking that your brain just did not work that way. And my husband just got diagnosed at 40, how old is he? 44 with ADHD. And, his whole life, he really struggled. I mean, really struggled. And now all of a sudden he's like, no wonder, But there's also this is also a shift now. We have this generation, this older generation that's getting diagnosed with ADD and ADHD or neurodivergence and autism spectrum disorder because it wasn't even on the radar, 30, 40 years ago. And now these folks, especially women, right? I mean, we're talking about us here, especially women where, now we're in our 40s and we have, a job and we have kids and we have a household and we have childcare and we have, all of these components to our life that require attention, but also they require us to juggle. And so knowing about how we function and how we can do multiple things at once is a huge asset. And you're seeing this influx of women over 40 getting diagnosed with ADHD as well. And it's, again, like a light bulb went off. The other factor that we are beginning to have more conversations about with women in our age group is perimenopause and all of the symptoms that go along with that and how that can conflate burnout symptoms or stress symptoms. And really, they can exacerbate it and they can be confused by it. And they're often dismissed by doctors because menopause and women and perimenopause is just not a specialty in women's medicine the way that it needs to be able to diagnose and treat effectively.
Oh, let's get on the hormone kick for a minute. But first, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be back with hormones.
This podcast is sponsored by Lara Jane Coaching. You know you're ready to silence your inner bully voice. Let Lara Jane support you with coaching. To schedule an introduction call, go to larajanelayton.com.
All right, Camilla, I have a story about this.
About perimenopause and hormones?
About hormones, yes.
Oh, I would love to hear it because yes, I want to hear your story because
I started just being technically a bitch. I was ready to bite everybody's head off and just not even wanting to leave the house. I was just angry. I'd go to restaurants and nobody could do anything right. And I'm like, what is happening to me? I am not this way. And I heard something about estrogen. And I thought, oh, maybe I need some estrogen. And I go to my doctor. He takes my levels and he says, your levels are right in line with your age. Well, you look at the report, I have no hormones. There's none. And so I begged him to put me on some estrogen. He says, I need at least something. Let's try it. And he says, I will only if you commit to having regular mammograms because there's some of the cancers in your breast that will trigger with estrogen. So I said, I will do it. 3 days with some estrogen in my body. And that went away.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not snapping at everybody anymore. I am back to the person I was for years, a happy-go-lucky, let's just have a good time and let's love everybody, la la. Well, and like we forget just because it's in normal range doesn't mean it's good for you.
Well, oh my God. I mean, this is what we're going to talk about because there's so much that needs to be said and there's so much that needs to be heard and we need to continue this discussion. But do you mind if I ask you a couple of personal questions about that?
Sure.
How old were you when this was going on?
I am 64, probably 61.
Looking good. So just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And was the medical health concern that you had, was that breast cancer related?
No, it was not. It was heart related.
It was heart related. Because that's interesting because if that was only a few years ago, the study that he's referring to with estrogen, unless there's some other, there's some other medical history that I don't know about with yours, which you don't have to share with me, but there was one study, the Women's Health Initiative study that came out, I think in the 90s, where this was the one study that everybody took and ran with connecting estrogen with breast cancer. And since then, it has been completely debunked. And, but there's still even 30 years later, there's still physicians that think that adding estrogen in to our system during perimenopause and menopause is going to cause cancer. And it's just not the case. And that inexperience and that level of being uneducated is really affecting women. And what we can talk about this in a minute.
No, I know it's fine. And because I think it's very relevant because my
Oh
bully
yeah.
kicked in. My bully was life is awful.
Yep.
Life is no good. And it just would play and play. But once I got that help of normal estrogen in your body, estrogen is normal. It's not a drug. It's not something we shouldn't take. But once I got that, my whole life went back to what I felt like years before.
Well,
And
and estrogen also affects our stress response. Estrogen helps mitigate our cortisol levels and our stress response. So when we have a dip in estrogen, that also has a dip in our ability to manage stress and evaluate stress. So, and we have estrogen receptors all through our brain. And for me, it was an estrogen. My estrogen was fine. I needed to balance it out with progesterone and testosterone. And
yes,
the thyroid hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, those are the ones that should be tested for, and all of the thyroid hormones should be tested. But the problem is that those levels fluctuate not just over the course of our menstrual cycle, but within the course of a day. So when you're trying to get what's called a normal read, one that is individual. Yours is different than mine. My normal levels are different than your normal levels. And so if you don't have a baseline of what your normal was when you were not in perimenopause, then you don't have anything to tell you whether it's normal or not. And the second thing, you also then have to be aware of where you are in your cycle, where you are during the day to be able to have an accurate measure of what is normal and what is not normal.
when I got my hysterectomy back in my 30s, I was advised to get a hormone test so I knew what my normal levels were. And I
Really?
never did it. Yeah, it wasn't by the doctors. It was by somebody else. It's just go get a reading of where your normal is. So if you're happen, I know you're in your 40s, go get a test now.
Mhm.
Let's get it checked so you have a baseline for how you feel today. Maybe they're already low, but at least they're not going to get lower.
Well, and the other thing that is not really well studied, but is, because I have the testosterone has been a game changer for me. I mean, testosterone and progesterone at night have been just life changing for me.
Mhm.
Because I was like you, I wasn't so much angry, but I had no motivation. I was in a lot of pain. I've exercised almost every day my entire life, a little bit, but I've always been very active. My workouts, I could not go for a run without feeling like I thought I had Lyme disease again. I had Lyme disease several years ago. I thought I had Lyme disease. That's how bad I felt. The fatigue, the exhaustion, the physical pain, and then the burnout symptoms that all kind of overlap with each other. And so how do you know if it's perimenopause or burnout if your doctor isn't literate enough to be able to evaluate whether you're in perimenopause or not? And
Right.
so it's, because the definition of menopause, do we need to get back?
No.
Okay. Are we recording still?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. The definition of menopause is when you don't have a period for a year, which means that you can't actually be defined as being in menopause until after it's already happened, which means that there is then no definition of perimenopause because perimenopause is before you have menopause. But if you can't determine whether you're in menopause until you've actually been through it, we have a great deal of ambiguity here where, we have very little testing that we know to be accurate. The doctors that are literate in that testing are few and far between. And in the meantime, we have a lot of women that are over 40 or even in their late 30s going to the doctor and saying, look, I have these symptoms. Oh, that's the other thing I started having was panic attacks. Panic attacks. I don't want to get out of, yes, don't want to get out of bed. All of these symptoms. And so they're going to, the tools that they have that is depression, that is anxiety. And if you do the scoring, if you do the general anxiety disorders testing and the personal health information testing, that those scores, because those are for depression and anxiety, those scores will come up positive because it's how you feel. But that may be just a symptom of perimenopause rather than clinical depression or clinical anxiety. And so a lot of women are being put on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications that will help you feel better. And that is definitely something to consider because you will feel better. But there may be more to your story than, especially if you have no history of these things and it's coming out of the blue and you're in this age group. The other component that was applicable to me and is also applicable to many other women is we did a lot of fertility treatments. So we did IVF, we did IUI. And so I did those later in life. I had my son at 41. And so coming off of all of those massive hormone swings, that can actually translate into that perimenopause. And women that have been going through IVF, especially later in life, you've had these broad hormone swings and your body is just going to continue to have those large fluctuations. And so you may be hit really hard with perimenopause like I was. And we had burnout, we had perimenopause. So I had just this, this trifecta of stuff going on and really one day just could not get out of bed. And it wasn't until we had friends over and thank God my friend Adriana is very proactive. And I was telling her like how I felt. And she just looked at me and she was like, dude, you're in perimenopause. And I was like, and we're the same age. We're almost the exact same age. And I was like, what? And she's like, here, call this doctor. And that's how I got on track was from, one of my dear friends. And, it really, we talk about this age, post 40 for women, and we're often in the throes of our career, throes of raising our children. We're still in these kind of traditional gender roles where women are still doing most of the household work, the child rearing, but yet we're still working full time. And many of us are the breadwinners in our family. And so we also have that responsibility. Plus now we are having less motivation, less energy, more stress. We don't feel like ourselves. So we start questioning, are we supposed to actually be, am I living the life that I want? Is it me? And so this was all the things that I did. What can I do? I'm the problem. Let's find the solution. I must be the solution. But changing the exercise didn't help. Changing the nutrition didn't help. And it really wasn't until I was able to determine what that root cause was that I started feeling better. And there were other things that I needed to do that were contributing to my burnout, but getting those hormones under control was the game changer for me. And then I had the energy to work on all of the other things that were contributing to my burnout.
I think this is a great conversation, and I think it is directly related to what we started talking about is that stress and that inner critic. Because as your hormones start to move, you're going like, I have done everything. I'm doing my yoga. I'm doing my meditation. I'm doing all these things that are supposed to calm you and help. But your body just physically can't do it. Mm-hmm. And you start beating yourself up because, oh my gosh, I don't feel like doing anything. And we go through that cycle. So if you're doing all of those things to keep you calm and cool, and you're doing your breath work, and you still can't control it, go get your hormones checked. But not with a family doctor. It's a HRT doctor, a hormone replacement therapy. You want to do something in that realm to give yourself the ability to use your powerful inner intuition and mind that you have. It's just blocked. And so I don't think we deviated at all from our topic, because if you are in perimenopause, which very likely you are, do it. Well, it's a simple test. Do it.
It's a simple test. And, what doctors that are menopause literate doctors, what they, as we were saying with our levels and how difficult it is to test what is quote unquote normal, what we do know is not necessarily what's normal, but we do know what's optimal. And we do know where our levels, where as women, where we thrive, what levels our estrogen should be at, what levels our progesterone, our testosterone, our thyroid levels. So that's where most of these menopause doctors are living, and not so much what's normal, but what is optimal. And I love, love, love that shift, because people don't want to just be okay, especially women. Like, we want to be living our lives to the fullest, and we want it all. We want to be, we want to feel good about our careers. We want to feel good about parenting and about being a spouse or a partner. And so that's where I think shifting that to not just being okay or good enough, but being exceptional. And that's where, if you can find the menopause literate doctors are really interested in that part. And they're really fighting the good fight. And many of them are women like us, like you and me, that have been through it. And we're like, this is kind of BS. There's a better way to do this. And they have used their education, and they have used their privilege and their knowledge to learn about it and to bring it to other women. And it's fantastic movement. It is. But just to give you an idea of how little this is researched. So the National Institute of Health is our largest contributor to research. And they have, I think it's like $47 billion. So they have categories of specialties that they study based on relevance and importance and urgency. And so they have women's health. And so in each category, there might be double dipping. So for example, you might have a study that is done on women and heart. And their hearts. And that would be categorized in both women's health and in cardiology. But just take it at face value. They have a specialty for menopause. I'll leave the question to you. At what year do you think that they designated menopause as a specialty area of study to dedicate funding to?
What year?
What year?
Maybe 2 years ago.
You are correct. 2022.
Yeah. You know what? It just floors me that there's commercials all over the place about men and hormone replacement and get your testosterone checked. And even the normal doctors do it. But the advertisements for women are go get eyelashes on, go get Botox, go get all these other things. And it's like, why is there not a commercial or a place for get your vitality back with hormone replacement? Because it's hard to feel pretty when your body isn't feeling normal anymore.
Oh, Laura Jane, you're so right. You're so right.
Yeah, we cover it up with makeup. I don't feel good, so I'm just going to pile it on. And, makeup's fine. I'm not saying makeup's bad, but that's what we're told to do, cover it up.
Well, and this actually leads to one of my personal problems with the marketing is this is why I don't love the term self-care. And I use it because it resonates and people know what I'm talking about to an extent. But that is exactly why I have the problem with that term self-care. Because one, you don't hear men talking about their self-care. It is almost exclusively for women. And two, when it is self-care, it is those types of things, is spending money on. It is. Self-care is going to your doctor and saying, getting my hormones checked. That is self-care. And self-care is listening to podcasts like this, where we can talk about these things that women know and feel, but feel like they are the only ones going through it. And so I think changing that narrative of what is self-care and what is not self-care is very important, because self-care doesn't necessarily have to do with your health. It has to, and that's one of the shifts that I think that we can start making now. But you said one other thing, and it triggered a thought in my mind. And I forget what it was, but
let's go ahead.
That's okay. I forget. Because it's my perimenopause brain. It's my perimenopause brain, Laura Jade. It's the brain fog.
I tell people my memory's not what it used to be, but I need to quit saying that because my memory is sharp, right? Anyway, I was going to say, I have a blog out on my website that's called Self-Care from the Inside Out. And it pretty much just describes us as a home. And we can paint the outside and we can have most beautiful manicured landscape. But if we aren't taking care of the foundation and the things that nobody sees, that's what we're living in, is this hoarder type house that's awful on the inside. Yet people drive by and go, oh, that's so pretty. I want to feel living on the inside. And it's easier, I think. I'll probably write another one because the more I go through it, it's like a car. You know, you can have a beautifully washed, perfectly shiny car, and the engine can be falling out, or the brakes don't work, or it's out of gas. And you got to take the time to fill up the gas. You got to take the time to do the maintenance. And those are the things that keep the car going. Your car can go 100 miles an hour and look ugly on the outside. It doesn't, the outside doesn't make the car work. So it's that's my self-care, is if it's on the inside. And it's like, if a massage helps your inside, do it, because that peaceful relaxation is great. And if you have the money for the Botox and the eyelashes and the eyebrows and the permanent makeup, it's okay. It's okay to be beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But you want to feel beautiful and not just, oh, I'm looking beautiful for everybody else. I want to wake up and be beautiful for me. And that's what I feel self-care is. And so I just say self-care comes from the inside. And that's how I quantify what I think self-care is.
Well, and I love that because it doesn't preclude one or the other. You can have both. You can, and I think that caring for yourself from the inside out, that is your baseline. That's your foundation. And then, yes, whatever makes you feel good. But it's interesting because it reminds me of the differences between stress and burnout. And when we talk about burnout, what we talk about is burnout is really, it's the depletion of who we are as a person. And you can, that we feel that for a long time, we have not felt heard, we have not felt seen, we have not felt appreciated, we have not felt like we've been able to meaningfully contribute because what we have been contributing has not been acknowledged. And so when we talk, and stress is a physiological response, that's a physiological. Burnout is a much more personal concept, that when we feel like we have just given and given and given, and it has not been seen and it has not been heard, and then what, but this actually also has a very interesting evolutionary component to it, because the only way that we've been able to live this long, one, we have a great stress response, which our skepticism inside has helped us to live this long. But also, we got here through collaboration. We are a very community-oriented group of people, and we need to know that we are contributing to either our family or our friends or our community. We need to feel that way in order to feel like we deserve a place in our sphere. And if you look at, 15,000 years ago, one person, if they were separated from their community or their pack or their tribe, they would need to be looking out for predators. They would need to be hunting for their own food. They would need to be treating their own injuries. They would need to be protecting themselves when they were sleeping. So that would be an impossible task, and that one individual would not survive. So we need each other to feel like we are important, and we need to feel like we are contributing to something bigger than ourselves. And that is ingrained in who we are. And so when we talk, burnout has traditionally been a conversation that has to do with workplace. But from my experience and work with my clients, this transcends workplace, and this goes into the home and into our relationships, because the leading group of people now that are seeking out divorces are women that are tired of doing it all and not getting anything back. And they're looking at this, and because we now have a career, financially, we're not dependent on men anymore. And so we're looking at this and we're saying, why? What am I getting out of this? And so we're getting burnt out in our relationships. And you're seeing that. And that's where like this concept of burnout just being chronic stress is not true. It's much deeper than that.
Well, if you are in a relationship where the husband is doing minimal and you're doing it all, it actually is easier to be on your own.
That's exactly the mindset.
Yeah, it's like, that's one less person to do everything for. So I get it. And, not everybody's blessed with someone that picks up their share and is happy to do it. When my husband and I got married, it's like, I don't need you. I've been through a divorce. I've figured out how to do life on my own. I don't need you, but I want to have a partner and I want to be with you. And I was stubborn. I was crazy, but now I think I need him. I'm kind of got that codependency. Okay, no, it's not really codependency, but it's a working relationship or
partnership.
Yeah. And so I am not one that's ready to get rid of him because he does do things.
Me either. I mean, he's pretty handy,
One day he said, all I'm good for is my income. So, what he hears all the time now, you're only here for your income.
There was actually a study that was published earlier this year. And I think I might botch this part of it, but I want to say it was out of Denmark. And they looked at women our age and their burnout. And they determined that it came from three factors. One, that we are more likely to be working in jobs that have a higher turnover rate, which means that our work is more draining on us in a lot of ways. Two, that we are in the sandwich generation, where we are caring for our children, but also caregiving for our parents as they age. And so that caregiving can lead to compassion fatigue and also and exhaustion. And the third is that we still live in this society where women are doing the majority of the household and the childcare. And that on top of our work is contributing directly to why we are so exhausted and burnt out. And so this was a research article that was published in the journal Work. And those three factors they identified. So it's not just a feeling. It's not just a feeling. There is evidence to support what we feel and why we feel it.
I agree. And I know what a great research to do is.
I know, right?
Those are, like, if you think about it, where is the stress coming
There was a woman that thought about that research article.
I bet it was.
Yeah, she was like, I'm tired of this. I want some evidence. Let's do it. But it is remarkable to see it in print, because it is not just in our heads. And it goes back to the conversation about the physiological changes with hormones and our hormone balance. And, there's real stuff that is here, and you don't have to feel this way. There's real things that you can do, steps that you can take today to help really dig in a little bit. And the beauty about this is I think women are in general, I think women are curious and they are interested in learning more about themselves. And that's what this conversation is about here's the direction where you can learn a little bit more about yourself and get some insight so that you can make more changes and make the right changes that will help you feel better and be better.
Wow. We have really talked about a lot. And it's been fun and energetic and enlightening. And you got to come back.
I'll come back. I mean, this is my lived experience, but it like that coupled with my background and my education and my specialty, like it's just so, when you're living it and you're like, wait a minute. I've heard about this before, and now all of a sudden you're experiencing what perimenopause and burnout feels like, and all of these things and panic attacks and anxiety. and new things. Like, yes, I mean, it is. And I don't think that you and I are alone. I think that there are a lot of people that are looking for answers. And that's one of the things that I try to do is just help people come up with their own answers.
I honestly think had I been on estrogen, I would not have retired when I did. I think
Interesting.
my desires and my ability to just be okay with frustrating events would have been a lot better. I mean, it's great. I loved working. I loved being retired. I was very blessed to be in a position where I didn't have to keep working. So it wasn't that I am struggling. I don't know what the word is, but I had the ability to do it financially. And so it was just like, it's time. But had I learned that one nugget ahead, I probably would still be having fun in the office because it is
Interesting.
fun. It is rewarding. You make a difference. You make a difference in your kid's life. You make a difference in your husband's life. You make a difference in the world, but sometimes we don't see it. And when we let that critic tear us down without saying, where is this coming through? We always feel we might not be good enough. That's just something that goes through
I
our
agree.
mind because we want to be, we're high achieving people. So guess what? When we achieve something, we set another goal higher and we set another goal. And so we're always reaching. It's time to take a look back and look at all the things that you've accomplished, all the things you've done, and go, oh, I have made a difference.
And it's so much of being able to do that is also recognizing that you can dampen that voice a little bit. You can hear that voice, understand that it's always going to be there, but how do you work with it? And how do you just accept that to be part of your day and work with it to get to where you want to be? And that's where, those concepts of mindfulness and the mindfulness practices to be able to have that non-judgmental curiosity and observation about your own life and to be able to have that and practice that so that you can do this day in, day out and not need a crisis like what I had to say, wait a minute, this is not quite right. We have that ability to really day in, day out with the little things, turn those into positive things.
And that's why I say, change that bully to your best friend because it's not a different person. It's not a different, it's taking that negative thought and finding a way that it's your friend. Where if my best friend stumbled down, I wouldn't go, oh my God, you're such a klutz. I can't believe that. I would say, hey, let me help you back up. We need to do that for ourselves instead of, oh my God, I'm a klutz. Somebody might have saw me. I was at work and I fainted due to my old heart problems. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, can I help you up? I'm thinking, oh my God, what a klutz I am. Like I should have done something different. But nobody was, ha ha ha. Now that might happen if you're in elementary school, but you who are listening, you're not in elementary school unless you're a teacher.
Exactly. In which case, we're all here to help you.
So let's wrap up this session, and definitely we'll get you on the schedule to come back because this has just been a beautiful conversation that I feel will help other people. Just understand I'm not alone. So Camilla, will you tell us a little bit about what you do, how to get a hold of you, even though it's in the show notes? Let's go ahead and talk about you. And then what's that one thing we can do this week?
So absolutely. Thank you. So you can find me. The easiest way is on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. Handle is Dr. Camilla Moore, DrCamilla You'll see my face. You can go to my website, which is called The Wellness Cabinet. So www.thewellnesscabinet.co. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. But really, the way that I help people is I work one-on-one, or I also teach a course. And the course that I teach is pretty special. It was developed by the Benson Henry Mind Body Institute at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And I am a clinical instructor for them. And I teach this course. It's called the SMART program, Stress Management and Resiliency Training Program. It's online, so it's on demand. We go through all of this. The way that I describe it is, if you are feeling this way, you are feeling overwhelmed, you are feeling stressed, and you don't know where to start, this is your starting point. And so we understand, and I understand, that the biggest currency that we have right now is time. And so that's why I made it so easy. The videos are all less than 15 minutes. You can watch them. You could listen to them in your car on your way to work, or as you're waiting to pick your kid up, and just work through it on your own time. And then you have access to me. And I also work one-on-one with clients as we go through that course. And I love it. We really make a big difference. And for women, especially like you and me, Laura Jane, like, it's just a wonderful way to start analyzing and understanding why we feel the way that we do and what we can actually do about it. And so what I'm going to talk about today is there's one thing that one of my favorite exercises that we do in this whole program is called the energy battery. And so what you can do, if you have a pen and paper, grab it. If not, you could just kind of mentally do this. But it's a way of shifting our mindset from tasks and responsibilities to how much energy things are taking us. So you just draw a line down the middle, 2 columns, a plus on one side for charges, and then a minus sign on the other side. And so what you're going to do is just write all the things that give you energy on one side and all the things that take energy from you on the other. And so for me, that would be like, my plus side would be things like going for a run, having dinner with my family, cleaning up the house actually is a big positive for me. And on the negative side, it would be things like, on the positive would be my child. And on the negative would also be my child, not because I didn't love him, but because he's 4 and that's exhausting sometimes. If you're caregiving for a parent, that might be on the negative side. So what it does is it takes our mindset out of our task and responsibility, and it puts it into what is it taking from us and what are we getting from things? And it's a very powerful shift of how we can actually look at our life and start evaluating it in a different way.
That is perfect. I love that, because getting it out is the first step, then evaluating it. And until we get it where we can see it, I have a harder time juggling it in my head. Yep. If it's on paper, I can review and I can, how could I get more of this? How could I switch this? How could I, and it gives you something to look at while you're planning how to get through your week. I love it. So thank you, Camilla, so much for joining us. You've been absolutely great. Friend, I am not a licensed medical or mental professional. I am here for entertainment. Camilla and I have been people that have struggled, found things that help, and just want to share it with everybody because it may help you. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you for joining.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Laura Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss the next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.